Now that the finals are over and NBA fans' attention switches to the NBA draft, Luka Doncic, the potential #1 overall pick, becomes the talk of the town. But unless for some reason you're watching EuroLeague basketball or you're an NBA draft analyst, it's unlikely that you know much about the 19-year-old Slovenian. Sure, you've seen the 2-minute clips on Bleacher Report or ESPN and heard the comparisons to Larry Bird or Manu Ginobili. But what really lies behind the pretty boy with the Euro haircut? Well, if you're interested in a full breakdown, I'll tell you what, you've come to the right place. This is the complete overview of Luka Doncic for the 2018 NBA Draft.
Walk it like I talk it. Walk it like I talk it. Walk it like I talk it. Woo. Walk it like I talk it. Hey. Walk it like I talk it. 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 Woo. Walk it like I talk it.
Starting with a quick bio, he was born in the Slovenian town of Ljubljana to a father who played professionally in Slovenia and a mother who was a hurdler in her younger years. He stands at a hefty 6'8", 228, and he plays for Real Madrid in League ACB. When you look at the awards and accomplishments he's amassed at the age of 19, it's really incredible. He has a domestic MVP, a EuroLeague MVP, championships in both respects there, both domestically and in the EuroLeague. He was also the youngest player to ever make his debut with Real Madrid, who is, outside of the United States, the best professional club in the world. So yeah, he can ball in Spain and he can ball in EuroLeague, but will he be able to ball in the NBA? And for that, we need to go to the tape. Let me start off with the attribute that has the NBA scouts really drooling, and that's his elite vision. Luka's ability to deliver crisp, clean passes without making eye contact with the recipient is as good as I've ever seen in a 19-year-old. Consider a play like this, where he doesn't make eye contact with the recipient the entire possession and still manages to deliver a perfect chest-level pass. That is not a drawn-up play, and Luka didn't even have to see him. He felt the double slide over and delivered it to where he knew the player was going to be. This is obviously not something that can be taught to a player, and he delivers passes like this routinely. He also does a fantastic job of not only delivering the ball inside, but outside as well. In a heavily three-point based NBA, you need to be able to find cutters and you need to be able to find three-point shooters. Luka does a good job of both. Like I was mentioning before with the crisp and cleanness, I think this is something that's overlooked. But with him, the ability to deliver the ball where shooters want it is fantastic. He has great touch on his passes. He's an absolute craftsman out of the pick and roll. And while European teams tend to run more motion offense, so he will not be immediately comfortable with holding the ball close to 10 minutes a game, this is just a matter of time with his elite passing and IQ before he's one of the best pick and roll playmakers in the NBA. Which leads me into my next point about Luka's game sense. And while game sense is like basketball IQ, I think it takes it a step further. With IQ, you know what to do for any given play. But with game sense, you're thinking 3 or 4 steps ahead. You can have one play fail and get back into another play seamlessly. He does this fantastically, and you see him drive, stop, bring it back out, and he's immediately ready to reset and attack again. To have someone at 19 years old be able to compile information this quickly, it's quite remarkable. If you have enjoyed the video so far, maybe consider giving it a thumbs up. And if you really like it, subscribe for more NBA content. And now back to the video. The penetration and then bringing back out reminds me a lot of like a Chris Paul who often penetrates, then brings it back out, and is immediately set for his next action. But Luka's 6'8", and Chris, is a midget. I think it's very much game sense too when Luka decides to pull the trigger from deep. Luka has a wide variety of step back, crossover, and pull-up moves from beyond the three-point arc. The way he reads defenses to determine how he's going to execute these moves is very impressive for a 19-year-old. You can see here, pull-up 3 in transition. As soon as he sees the defense sag, quick release, gets it off, scores. Here you have a crossover pull-up three-point shot, which he buries. But what's really interesting here is how well he reads the body language of his defender. As soon as he sees his defender's off balance, pulls that ball quick and gets it off nicely too. Obviously very comfortable taking this type of shot. His three-point percentages leave a lot to be desired, but the truth of the matter is he took 75% of his three-pointers off the dribble this year, and he's just 19 years old. One concern I have relating to his shooting though is his not so tight handle. I understand he's 6'8", but he's just dribbling too slow on some of these crossovers, and better on-ball defenders, especially threes, think of someone like Paul George or Kawhi that's going to be covering him, is going to get their hand in there a lot if he does not tighten that up. That being said, he does do a good job of stringing multiple dribble moves together at once, and unlike Julian Newman's style, these dribble moves actually get defenders leaning one way or another and can lead to opportunities to attack the rim or to step back and shoot a three. His mid-range game is not fully flushed out, but I think that's kind of a result of him not running the pick and roll so much. But I'll tell you this, he does have a little bit of a back to the basket game. He's got pretty good footwork on some of these turnaround shots I'm showing you here. And even though that's kind of fallen out of style with a lot of teams, it can be a useful tool, especially late in games. So I would like to see him develop that a little bit more, maybe not his first year, but later on in his career. Now we have to talk about his penetration. And this is where a lot of red flags pop up for people and why he's not considered like a consensus number one pick and why DeAndre Ayton is probably going to beat him for that number one spot. Taking into account his height and his weight, I will put Luka in the average to slightly below average category of athlete. His jump height is fine, and he even has a couple poster dunks against grown men in League ACB, but the real problem is his explosion, especially turning corners, leaves a lot to be desired, especially against smaller people like you see in this clip here that have more speed than him. He just can't get around that corner, and because of this he's forced to take a pull-up shot a lot of the time instead of finishing through with his drive. Someone like Paul George that's going to be covering him next year, that can cover a ridiculous amount of ground with each step, is just not going to get scored on inside by this guy unless it's on some type of wild shot or a floater. He's also almost an exclusively right-hand finisher, concerning for someone that already has trouble finishing around the rim. The one silver lining in his inability to blow by defenders is the level of craftiness that he's cultivated. He's worked hard on things like the up and under and his floater in order to finish on defenders that have good positioning. The thing with all of these flaws I'm pointing out is that they really only apply to Luka in the half-court set. In transition, it's a whole different animal. Dangerous from the second he grabs the rebound, he has no problem pushing the pace constantly. He also loves to switch hands in transition, which keeps the defense off balance. He transitions from a scorer to a playmaker seamlessly, never getting tunnel vision when attacking the rim. Transition is just another area on the offensive end where Luka excels. As far as rebounding goes, you're not drafting this kid to give you 10 plus a night, but the combination of his size, height, and intensity leaves him pretty adept at pulling down boards. What is especially important when it comes to his rebounding is his ability to start a break right after grabbing a defensive board, a la Russell Westbrook style. The final piece of in-game analysis that I'm going to cover is Luka's defense. And this, similar to his penetration abilities, is concerning because of the lack of athleticism and lateral quickness that he displays. After he puts on some muscle in the league, he'll probably be a pretty serviceable power forward defender. But in a league moving more and more towards switchability, it can't feel great knowing your top 5 pick may be able to cover one position well in the future. The one thing I do like about his defense is how he uses his big frame to body offenders without reaching in and getting fouls called on him. This is the reason I mentioned before I think he could be a good power forward defender once he puts on some muscle. Now we can start with some intangibles. And one thing that really stood out to me as I watched Luka's film was how often he lets his emotion shine through. He clearly is a ferocious competitor and is not afraid to get in grown men's face when he feels it's appropriate. Having what amounts to basically a kid who's not afraid to go head to head with anyone is the exact type of personality trait you look for. He's also not afraid of the bright lights, and there were several examples I could find of him hitting big shots in the playoffs and in EuroLeague. A ferocious competitor with a knack for the big moments is how you could start the description of just about any great NBA player ever. Now the last section, and everyone's favorite section, player comparisons. I thought about this one for a while, and I ended up coming up with perhaps a strange conclusion with how highly I've talked about Luka in this video. I decided the best player comparison for Luka was Joe Johnson. Builds are very similar, about 6'8" and somewhere between 225 and 250. Both are outstanding passers, but not that athletic and have to rely on craftiness to score around the hoop. Great post-up games for wings, and Joe was an early adopter of taking threes off the dribble. Both have a knack for the big moment and can score in ISO situations without cutting to the hoop. And while Luka's ceiling is certainly higher than the one All-NBA second team Joe made, the similarities in their game are undeniable. In conclusion, Luka is a can't-miss prospect. A few glaring flaws are far outweighed by the obvious upside of his incredible passing and off-the-dribble shooting. I suspect Luka will go second overall to the Sacramento Kings. And as always, thanks for watching.